So I threw this yesterday. It's a pitcher, so it's going to need a handle, and it's going to need a good trim. I still have it attached to the bat itself, which I always do. I let them pop off on their own, and I want to trim this right side up. If I was to turn this over and try to trim it, it wouldn't set flat because this isn't going to be level anymore because I pulled the spout on it. So it's important that I leave it stuck to the bat and I trim it all just like it is right now. Okay. But before I do that, I want to pull my handle so I can let that start to set up and dry. So a chunk of clay, that's actually a decent size for what I'm doing. I'm going to set this off to the side. And that's not too bad, it's in good shape. I take this and just roll it out a little bit. And as I roll, I just kind of extend my fingertips just a little bit. Okay. Turn off the wheel just to make sure I don't kick the pedal and send this flying. I'm going to try to do this in a few different positions so that you can see it really well. But I'm going to get really wet to begin with. And make sure my hand is really slick as well. I use a thumb right in the middle and fingertips wrapped around. So I'm holding it like this. I grab onto the handle, top of it. I squeeze and pinch. Then I go this way, the side, and as I come down, I squeeze more and more to taper it down. Now here's the trick. You've got to do a really light squeeze and very quick. If you go slow and try to control it and pinch and pull, it's going to get really uneven, and you're probably going to tear it off at some point. And if it's too thick somewhere low, I can do a couple little ones there and then go back up. It's not unusual to tear these at least once, and it usually happens really low. Now I've got this little crack line that's been there from the beginning. I think this clay was just a little bit dry, so it's not liking it. And hopefully that'll stay on and I can fix that in a little bit. So we're getting there. And you can just do this until you feel like the thickness is about right. And the part my hand is holding on to, all that just gets cut off. We're not going to use that. All right, so let's take a look. And I would just kind of envision it being attached here. All of this would be cut away. There we go. So I'd have a high handle. I could take it all the way down if I want to make a longer one. But I think I'm going to set this one up just the way it is. And what I mean by set it up is I'm just going to take a bat. I'm going to push this in. I just want to create the beginning of that curve as it dries. So now I need to trim this guy. Now I cannot trim the rim. but I certainly can come back and smooth it out. So I will start with that, and then I'll let this dry a little bit, and then I will do it again. I don't actually want to make it soggy. I don't mind if it absorbs a little water high up here because I'm going to be attaching that handle up high. So it's not the worst thing. But I just want the rim just wet enough to take off that uneven clay. And these sections where I pushed it with the tool to create the spout, I usually just clean those up a little bit, but I kind of like to leave the lines. That's just going to be preference. Okay, so that already looks a lot cleaner to me. Yeah, that I'm happy with. Okay. Okay, so when I trim a picture, the first thing I'm actually going to look at is here. Now I know that the spout bulges, but it only does to this point. Below this, I could trim anywhere below this point. This I'll leave alone completely, but I can work right here if I want to. So since that's the first opportunity, that's the point to start. Now, I could have left that, but I just want to take a little bit of the weight out. And I want to make this line just a little bit more dramatic. Just taking that little bit of clay away gets that done. Now, no picture is going to be perfect through the belly because as soon as you push this in, you affect the entire piece somewhat. While it's mostly affected at the very top, everything else is affected somewhat. So you're going to have a little bit of a bouncier ride as you trim than usual, and that's okay though. Just hold your hand really steady. By the way, if you use these mud tools, they have a tendency to dig into your hand if you hold them the way I do, where I like to hang on to them. If that happens, you can wrap it up into a rag, and then you don't get that uncomfortable feeling. Now, how do we know thickness when we can't put a hand on the inside and feel? You know, when I do a bowl, I just feel it inside and out. But anything where we can't get our hand in, you can just tap. And you'll get real good at feeling how much is there just by that little tiny tap. You'll hear it, or you'll just feel it. I mean, is it a hollow, Easter bunny, chocolate Easter bunny, or is it solid? You don't need to feel the inside to know the difference. I suspect the day is coming very soon where there will be a tool that we can just hold up against the edge at any given point and it'll tell us the exact thickness of the wall. All the pottery instructors will be so excited to run around with that. And students will love it too because they won't have to have their pieces cut in half. to see how much is there. They can just look at their tool and say, oh, yep, there's still more there. I can do another raise, or I can stretch that belly a little bit farther. There we go. Okay. All right, that's feeling pretty darn good. I'm going to take just a hair more down here. And hopefully I don't cut through. I frequently put a second hand on my hand, and I frequently rest it on my pan because I always want to be steady when I trim. You know, when I see people doing this, it makes me cringe because as soon as they get pushed, they're going to keep moving. So it's real important to be steady. And for me, this works the best, that two hands leaning over the splash pan. Now I'm going to take this guy and just clean up the bottom. And on this one, I think I'm going to cut under just a little bit. There we go. Oh, I like that. Okay, so while we were waiting for the handles to set up, just a few minutes ago I added just a damp cloth around the back of this, and I just attached it here with the mud tool. Just to soften it up a bit. That's definitely better. All right, so the first thing I have to do is determine where I'm going to attach the handle. And I know I want the top to be fairly high on this guy. A lot of times I'll put it just below this little, this thick rim, or right on it and flare off. And on this guy, I think I like it high on this one. But really, you know, I do it both ways. They both look good. And the first thing I always do is just split the pot into two visually. As long as it looks pretty even, and this is the point that I'm going to make my attachment. So scratch it up, and I made, well, I'm always making slop, so I just took this out of the bucket. Slap a little bit down there. If you're OCD, this is probably making you crazy. I'm sorry. If you're like me, it just looks like fun. Okay. So I've got a ton on there. I'm just going to take one of the handles, doesn't even matter which. They both look pretty much the same. And I think I'm going to cut it right here. And then take a look. So this is my thought on this guy. I sort of like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shave this down a little bit, create more surface by changing the angle. I'll scratch that up so that it can grab a little bit better. I'm just going to dip it in this really, really wet slop here. Push it up against. Last chance to make sure that I get this right on splitting. I could just do this again. I'm looking to make sure that it's pretty equal. If it feels balanced, then I make sure that this is right down the middle. That looks pretty good. You know, if you miss it, you can always cut it off and do it again. But it's nice to get it right the first time. So already this wants to take, which is good. And I'm just pushing it up and in, making it just a little thinner through there, giving it a lot of surface to grab. Okay. Now I have to line this straight up with me. I'm sorry you won't be able to see quite as well for a second. I'll turn it back. I just want to make sure everything looks pretty straight. Looks pretty good. Scratch away a little bit. Add a little bit more slop. And I don't really need to scratch up too much surface on the pot down there because I've actually got a fairly long tail on this one that I think I'm going to leave just for fun. Okay. So I'm going to push that in. I scratched it up on the underside of this guy from here to here. And I just did a little patch where I scratched up on there and I threw a little bit of terracage in between. Or not terracage, I'm sorry, just slop. And I think I'll just give this kind of a sort of a playful little twist. Okay. Now I could call that good and be done. But I think what I will do instead, I'm going to decorate it up here a little bit. I'm going to give it more surface to hang on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice some of this off, cut another piece. So I've got this chunk. Scratch a little bit, but I don't really need much of anything. It'll take really well. I'm going to set it right up on top. And push it down and in. Now, if you're in a really dry climate, then your handles probably crack off once in a while they're drying. I used to live in Colorado, and I used to have that problem all the time. And I figured a couple things out. One, they're most likely to crack here. So what you can do, if you're in one of these dry climates, Utah, Colorado, anywhere in the West really, but those are a couple dry states, Arizona, you can cut off little chunks of clay and you can actually wrap the pot. So, and you try to make it a decorative feature, but you can come around here with some sort of blocking around the outside. And then if it cracks away, this blocking doesn't crack. It just cracks a little bit on the underside and you never see it. So it disappears. And you could make these fun. They can be pointed and whatever you want to do. Sometimes I used to come back and make them almost look like they were attached mechanically. There we go. You can do the same thing up here. And you can do it on the side. Get creative. And if we really like that thing, we could certainly do a couple down here as well if we wanted to. The beauty of all this is there's no right and wrong. Just play with it and have fun with it and decide how serious you want it to be or how whimsical you want it to be. But the handle is a great place to add a little bit of expression. And what I would typically do is just leave this alone for a while. And then come back with a sponge and clean up any of the imperfections. And I would take my metal tool and shave off anything that I don't like, make it go away. And make it as perfect as I want. And you could spend a lot of time. If you want to make your pots really perfect, you can come back and just play and clean them up. Okay. So there we go. We got a handle. We got a nice little picture there. The only thing I have left to do is to match that to this side, and I'm done. All right. I hope this helped. Oh, before I leave, one last thing. If you are in one of those drier climates, you can take wax resist that you buy, for painting the bottom of your pots, put that coat on there so glaze doesn't stick. Take some of that and paint it over the seams right after you've attached your handle. And what it'll do, it will trap moisture in that joint. And so it dries slower and you're less likely to have cracking.